Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. This is your host, Michelle Shahid, Director Publications, ELS, and I welcome you all to the very first episode, The Literature Lounge, a podcast series created for the first time in the history of English Literary Society, ELS, NUML, Islamabad. In each episode of The Literature Lounge, we will delve into the enchanting world of literature and language, where we will explore a wide range of genres, themes, and writing styles contextualized in the modern literary world. Our podcast is designed to explore fresh new perspectives, and each episode will feature a special guest to aid our discussion. I would like to welcome our podcast's first guest, Dr. Uzma Abid Ansari. Dr. Uzma Abid Ansari is Assistant Professor in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Department of English Studies at NUML, Islamabad. She completed her PhD from the Amsterdam School of Cultural Analysis at the University of Amsterdam with her dissertation on Orhan Pamuk's City and Turkish Republic, an engagement with the modern nation-state. Since then, she has published papers on musealization of the city, on tribal representations in Pakistani Anglophone fiction, and constructions of racialized identities as the basis for the Pakistani nation-state. Her field of research is cultural studies and modern nomadology and representations of cities in literature and film. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. How are you doing today?
Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And it's an honor to be here and to be the first guest. Thank you so much.
It's an honor to have you on our program. Thank you so much for joining us. So moving on to today's episode, it's titled Popular Fiction, a Contemporary Literary Form. Here we will explore the world of mainstream literature that captivates millions. From romance to thrillers, popular fiction has taken the world by storm. But before we dive into our main segment, let's kick off things with a thought of the day. Today's thought comes from Stephen King, a master of popular fiction. Books are a uniquely portable magic. Take a moment to ponder on that thought. Join us as we unravel the mysteries that make popular fiction so engaging and influential. Grab your favorite beverage, settle into your cozy spot, and let's embark on this literary exploration together in the Literature Lounge. Let's begin our discussion with an introductory question. Ma'am, would you kindly shed some light on what do you make of the term popular fiction? And how is popular fiction more different than the more classic forms of fiction? So what exactly makes something popular?
Okay, so first of all, let's just start with the word popular. Why do we use the word popular for popular fiction? It's part of the larger popular cultural landscape, which means that this type of fiction is meant for mass consumption and mass readership.
Right.
And the reason that authors write this fiction is so that they can actually make some money out of that. And this is the basis of popular culture and, in extension, popular fiction as well.
Right.
And you might know this already, or our students might know this already, but popular fiction is also called genre fiction. And it's called genre fiction because it has been classified into different categories that cater to niche markets. So, for instance, if you like detective fiction, detective stories, the publication houses are going to cater to your needs and requirements, what you desire to read.
Right.
And if someone wants to read romantic fiction, they're going to cater to the needs of that type of readership. So that's why it's very market-oriented and very commercialized fiction.
Right.
That's why it's called popular fiction. Yes.
Right. So moving on from there, I think to understand any literary form or anything in general, you have to focus on like the origins, like how it evolved into what it is. So for popular fiction, when we look at its evolution, how exactly did it come into the form that it is today? Like with the emergence of any literary form, there's usually a turning point.
Yes.
Like when we see modernism, it emerged as an aftermath of like World War I.
Yeah.
So what kind of developments can be found in it these days, especially in regards to styles or themes?
So your question is two-tiered. Right. So I'll begin with the first part, which is that how did it actually begin, how this classification of literature began. So from the mid 19th to late 19th century, there was this upsurge of a readership, which were in England especially, who were reading newspapers and weekly magazines. And in those magazines, some authors were getting sections of their books that they couldn't get published elsewhere. They were getting those sections published. So, for instance, Arthur Conan Doyle got his really famous Sherlock Holmes series published. He started with the Strand magazine. And there were other authors like him who were making money like this as well. And then because of the massive success of these kind of stories, they eventually got to publish them as, case studies of these certain detectives. And then the same was the case with, romantic novellas, because women had learned, there was an educated female readership now, and they wanted to read a certain type of genre fiction. So towards the end of the 19th century, there was this upsurge of readership, and they were demanding and desiring this kind of fiction. And because this was also the time, because we need to look at the political economy of those times, and these were colonial times, people wanted to know what was going on in the colonies as well. And so there was this interest in exotic locations, exotic people that were not from Europe or England, and just this increased interest in what was going on around the world. And then authors were kind of cashing in on this interest of the people. So they wanted to write stories about India and Africa, and mystery stories, romance stories,
lands.
Yes, exactly. And generally, because at the turn of the 19th century, as the 20th century began, there was a generally depressive mood in the Western world because the Great War, the First World War, was looming ahead. Obviously, people were anticipating this event to take place.
Right.
And people were generally, they had turned into an escapist mode. And they were looking for an escape from their mundane existence, mundane realities that were kind of depressing for them. So this was a way out for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And, talking about how this, the context of the world was changing. And if we come to the present times, this is like a digital age, or I would say a modern age, where social media is really prevalent.
Yes.
So especially when we look at critiques, they're not limited to scholarly people or literary persons. Everyone on the internet has a say about everything.
Yes.
So when it comes to popular fiction, it often faces this criticism from people for being too formulaic or lacking depth. And it is often accused of being derivative and unoriginal. Do you agree with any of these assertions at a degree?
Well, popular fiction definitely is all of these things. It is formulaic, and it is repetitive even, because it has these characters which are, first of all, they're typecast.
Right.
So there's a lot of stereotyping of gender, ethnicity, or, these days it's politically incorrect to use the word race, but they are racialized characters there as well. You can find them in popular fiction. And so these things are problematic. But the thing is, again, we need to keep in mind that publishing houses, they want to sell these stories. They want to make money. And readers, the masses, they want to read this literature, this fiction. Right. So the criticism is actually not that kind of a scholarly criticism. It is perhaps based on the notion that there needs to be a little more creativity in the plot development, for instance. And there is one feature of popular fiction that makes it very, very different from literary fiction, which is more canonical, more profound and philosophical. And this feature is that it is completely plot-driven. So people want to know how a story begins and how it ends, and what happens in the middle. And there is no character development. So that's a really important and significant feature of popular fiction. And to be honest, someone who is addicted to books like even science fiction, sci-fi, or even salvage punk, which is kind of like a subgenre of science fiction. And there's dystopian fiction. They're not really interested to see how these characters are developing, what's going on in their, psychologically, how are they maturing, or, whatever is happening to them emotionally. What they're interested to know is what's going to happen next.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like you and me as scholars of literature, we can kind of like criticize this type of a plot line as very shallow and superficial. But not
so much of a literary background, maybe. They read for later.
Exactly. But everyone's not a student of literature.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and they just want to like consume these stories. And this is a type of consumption as well that our modern society, especially the postmodern consumerist society, it thrives on.
True.
Yeah. And one more feature of popular fiction that I forgot to mention, it's really important, is that it's adaptable. It's adaptable to digital media platforms and even cinema and all the famous films, that Hollywood films and British film productions today, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and the rest. I'm not really into dystopian or salvage punk, but these days I know youngsters are. So all of these are adaptations of works of popular fiction. They were novels before they were adapted into films. Yeah. Right. So.
So when talking about this, like, consumerist sort of mindset, like how readers want to consume this certain style and they're liking this. So this shift towards popular fiction, which often features, like you said, relatable characters and maybe urban or modern themes. Do you think literature has in this way become more accessible to the general public? Like we were talking about how maybe me or you, I'm doing a degree in English literature. So someone with like an English literature degree may like analyze the works a lot or like have certain critiques of it. But for the general public, literature becomes more accessible when we find these more relatable characters as opposed to the traditional, more larger than life characters or grand themes.
So in that sense, definitely literature has become more accessible to people who do not have a literary background.
Right.
But there is still this difference, because this type of literature or fiction, part of popular literature, I'm going to say literature over here because, these self-help books.
Yeah.
And, these are a part of popular literature. You have like numerous books on these, like there's Ikigai.
Exactly.
And there's how not to give
Yeah.
And so these books are really popular as well. And what it does is it creates this this circle of like common wisdom, So they're not necessarily didactic or really profound or philosophical, but then everyone relates to it and it offers them this common wisdom that they can live by.
Right.
So even if it's a work of fiction or a self-help book, or a coming-of-age book like Fault in Our Stars or those kind of books, it provides them with a sense of profundity, which is actually not there, but it is there, So
it makes you feel like you're reading something very profound. And
exactly. So it's marketable profoundness in life. And one good example is how well Rumi sells,
Exactly.
Like Rumi, they say, is the best-selling poet, Persian poet in the United States, for instance. And because it's so popular in the United States, therefore us like we kind of look up to the trends in the Western world.
Exactly.
So people have started reading Rumi over here as well. And these are translations of Rumi. And most of these translations, even the ones you find on social media and like more other popular platforms of this genre, they're not really good or exact or even faithful translations. Right. But they do give us this sense of, how profound our reading is.
Exactly.
And what I think is that this difference between the lay reader and the literary scholar is going to be there. But then again, there is the illusion of profoundness there. Yeah.
So, when we talk about this sort of like a commercial side to, popular fiction, how do you balance that commercial appeal with maybe the artistic integrity in popular fiction writing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because initially academia, in the British Academy, for instance, like a proper serious academic interrogation of popular literature began. I think it was in the University of Birmingham,
right?
Because in the West, they're very interested to analyze and look at popular culture, like what is it that the masses are living, what kind of culture is it that they're living. So they made this really careful distinction between popular fiction as part of low culture and literary fiction and literature, canonical literature, as part of high culture.
Right.
So that distinction of high culture and low culture was there, which it carries this sense of elitism, definitely. But low culture means that, again, the appeal to the masses is there.
Right.
And it's very quiche, it's quiche. And the postmodernist artist will find some kind of aesthetic quality in quiche, like there's Andy Warhol and other artists. But it's not like a very difficult art to understand, so the creativity is very easy to, it's accessible, it's easy to digest. But with literary production, literary culture and high culture, you need to have a background, or you need to have an education of the history of that subject. So if you're reading a book like a modern book or a postmodern book like 100 Years of Solitude, which is Marquez's book, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, very famous. You could even say it's popular, but the mass appeal is not there. So a very select kind of readership has acquired the aesthetic sense to appreciate that book completely and fully. That's because they know the background of the author, they know the background of Columbia and magic realism as this artistic, stylistic device. And they can appreciate that. And they have an appreciation for the absurd, the surreal, So it's an acquired taste.
Right.
So not everyone's going to enjoy sushi or, So, so I'm not being elitist or anything, but that's the difference.
The divide is always going to exist.
It's going to be there, yeah.
Right. So that brings us to one of our final questions. And that would be, I want you to share if you have any personal favorite works of popular fiction, something you could recommend. And if it has left like a lasting impression on you, why was it? Maybe there's a backstory to it.
Okay, that's a good question. That's my favorite question. So when I was growing up, like my most favorite book was the Harry Potter series. So I was a Potterhead through and through. Yeah. So I read all the 7 novels and this, part of the series. And would you believe it? I haven't seen any of the films.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Because I just couldn't bring myself to watch the films after having read the novels. So that was while I was growing up. But then in university, my taste started changing a little bit, like moving from fantasy fiction. I even like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. But
obsessed with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I was too, and I would still appreciate it, I guess.
Right.
But then I started moving away from Western literature.
Right.
And the first book, actually, I think this is from popular fiction, I read was by this author, Pico Iyer, and it's called Abandon.
Right.
And when I read that book, I don't know, I was just kind of so taken away, like it took my breath away, really. The story is so profound. And it's not literary fiction. I think it doesn't have that much literary quality, I think. But it's just such a beautifully written book. And I would recommend Pico Iyer, the author, as well. He's based in Japan. He's not really explored a lot. Like, people haven't read him a lot. But I mean, that's my all-time favorite. Abandon.
Some books stick to you.
Yeah. And also Orhan Pamuk's My Name is Red.
Right.
So that was his first book I read. And that's not popular fiction, actually. Like, in the Turkish version is not popular fiction. So when it was translated, yes, then it became popularized. But I read the translation, and that book also, like, it really changed the direction of my life, literally. So yeah, these two books, I would say, Abandon and Orhan Pamuk's My Name is Red.
It's Red.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And this was truly an enlightening discussion. It was an honor to have you here and learn so much from
Honor
you.
was all mine. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you for inviting me.
Is there anything you would like to add or make a final comment on? And then we can wrap up this first episode.
There's a lot I want to say about, just popular fiction. I can go on and on. But I just want to commend you and your team for this great initiative you've taken. And then generally, I've seen you guys work on all the projects that you have, and you do such a great job. And I'm really awestruck by your work. So thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It was a pleasure for me as well. And lastly, I'd like to thank our viewers for tuning in. We hope today's episode left you inspired, informed, and entertained. And before we sign off, there's something for the viewers. We'd like you to leave some comments on what your favorite popular fiction works are, and we will try to feature them on our Instagram page on the stories. So hit that subscribe button and let's embark on this exhilarating journey together. Happy reading and writing. Until next time. Allah Hafiz.